So happy you could make it. It would be great if everyone could introduce themselves with their names and their form and their pronouns in the chat. So thank you so much for joining us.
Me and Ryan and I will be sharing a PowerPoint.
So I'm Carolina and I'm from North Carolina and my pronouns are she, her.
Oh, Carolina, I think that we're doing that in the chat. Because, hold on.
Okay, we're doing that in the chat.
Okay, sorry. Ryan and I will be sharing a PowerPoint. Okay. This is our fast fashion webinar.
So I'll start with the first slide. What is fast fashion? Fast fashion is insensitive trendy clothing that samples catwalk or celebrity culture ideas and then develops them at really fast rates that are then sold in high street stores to meet customer demand. The aim of this is to quickly meet the newest trends and get them into market so the shoppers will pick them up when they are still at the height of their popularity. But after a few wears, just discard them. This clothing model fits into the idea that repeating an outfit is an embarrassment in fashion, and you have to continuously wear new clothes to remain relevant. This ideology is the reason for toxic overproduction and consumption that has made the fashion industry one of the largest polluters in the world.
What are the impacts of fast fashion? Toxic textile dyes make the fashion industry the world's second largest clean water polluter. Polyester, because of its low price, is one of the most popular fabrics used. However, it is extracted from fossil fuels, which contributes to global warming, and when washed, it can shed microfibers that add to the growing plastic levels in our oceans. Natural fibers may also be an issue. Conventional cotton is developed in developing countries requires huge amounts of water and pesticides. Constant production rates and demand mean that other environmental issues such as land clearing, biodiversity, and soil quality are increasingly under strain. The manufacturing of leather also affects the climate, adding 300 kilograms of chemicals for every 900 kilograms of animal hides tanned.
And there are some key factors that are common to fast fashion brands that we should look out for. You might see thousands of styles, which all touch on the latest trends. Some extremely short turnaround times between when a trend on a garment is seen in the catwalk or in celebrity media, and it just hits the shelves maybe like a couple of months later. Offshore manufacturing, where the labor is cheapest, with the use of workers on low wages and without adequate rights or safety. Limited quantity of particular garments. This idea pioneered by Zara, with new stocks arriving in store every few days and letting shoppers know that if they don't buy something now, then they'll probably miss their chance. And then, of course, really cheap and low quality materials where clothes degrade faster than normal just after a few wears and gets thrown away.
What can you do? Buy less. The root of this problem lies in our excessive consumerism. We need to change our lifestyle practices. Shop sustainably. Choose to purchase from ethical companies that prioritize their environmental and social impact throughout their sourcing and production. Make it last. Wear your clothes until they are worn out instead of throwing them away after a few uses. You could repair them, donate them, sometimes take them back to a store, or sometimes recycle them. Oh, and I just wanted to say that Caleb Peel, another member of the organization, helped to make this slideshow.
And now we're going to introduce our two amazing panelists who are going to talk to us today. So Sofia Alfred, she is currently doing a bachelor's degree in interactive media arts at the New York University of Shanghai. She is the CEO and founder of Tolosan Productions. She won prizes for short films and productions. She's also the marketing champion and golf services of Top Golf. And she's the co-founder, Arts Hub co-founder and ambassador of Tinstream. Thank you so much for coming, Sofia.
Our other panelist is Leslie Johnston. She is the current Chief Executive Officer at the Lauds Foundation, which she launched in January 2020. In 2018, Leslie hosted a TED Talk called Why Recycling Our Clothes Won't Change the World. Thanks for coming, Leslie.
And now we have some questions for you guys. So for all of you too, could you tell us more about yourselves and your connection to fast fashion?
Sophia, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm Sophia, and I did a lot of modeling and still currently do model. And so I kind of have like that point of view from like fashion and what's I get to see, you know, when something is trending and then seeing it go, you know, to the store and seeing kind of like the fads become forming. And so that's like kind of my connection to the fast fashion.
Great. And well, my name's Leslie Johnston. I am not a model and I'm not an influencer. So I'm fascinated, Sophia, to hear your story. My connection to fast fashion is from a different angle because over the past, 6 years, I've been running a corporate foundation that has been trying to transform the global fashion industry. That was called CNA Foundation, which is tied to a European fast fashion brand. But as Alexandra said, last year, I relaunched a new foundation, which is still focusing on fashion, among other areas, and really trying to use philanthropy as a way to catalyze the change that we need business and industry to make in fashion.
Great, we're so excited to have both of you. So for our next question, you can either go in the same order or whoever wants to answer it. It's pretty open-ended, but we've talked about what fast fashion is and some of its effects, but why is fast fashion so popular and what makes it so successful?
After you, Sophia.
You start.
Okay. All right. It's easier to go second. No, so great question. And I think, part of the challenge with the fast fashion industry is the very, assumptions behind it, because what perpetuates the industry, and I always call it, is often a race to the bottom because it's based on more and more volume, made with cheaper and cheaper labor at lower and lower cost, which then generates this kind of cycle or vicious cycle that is fueled by the demand. And the demand, of course, is fueled by population growth. And this is the challenge with fast fashion, because while we perhaps as Western consumers may say we want to limit our consumption, there are many countries in the world that are developing more, the middle classes are growing, and as people have more income, they want to buy more and more clothes. So I think the challenge with fast fashion is that, the consumers are not necessarily the primary change makers in getting the change that we want to see. And as long as the fashion industry is tied to the growth in population and growth in incomes, we really need to rethink the system behind it and the incentives that perpetuate this model. And there's many other models out there, but I think, as a foundation, we're focusing on how can we look at almost the, kind of the ideas and the incentives in the global economic system that actually make this model successful. And, I'll just give you one example, then I'll pass it to Sophia. I think one thing that's challenging is that the true cost of an item like a t-shirt is not being paid. If you look at a cotton t-shirt, it's actually made with cotton, and sometimes you have, some sort of man-made polyester material in there to make it stretchy. And polyester, of course, comes from the fossil fuel industry, so there should be a carbon tax in there. And cotton, of course, is one of the most thirsty crops, so therefore there should be a cost to the water and fertilizer that cotton uses. But those externalities are not being incorporated in the cost of a t-shirt. So if that's the case and you can buy a t-shirt for $3, well, why wouldn't you? But if the t-shirt actually costs $20 because it was incorporating these costs, that would be a different story. So I do think that if you're able to actually bring in these externalities into, the economics of the fashion industry, that would perhaps change the way that the industry is working. But right now, without that in place, it will grow probably as long as we grow as humankind in our population.
I want to like add on to like what you're saying, because as someone living here in China where, a lot of materials and products are being made, I do see that when someone sees something, you instantly can take a picture and then buy it for very, 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 very cheap. Like about like I could get really cool clothes for 20 to 40 kwai, which is like $3 American, yeah. And it can be like crazy things like dresses and all these elegant garments or whatever is like cool or trendy. You can get it for really cheap here. And so I feel that fast fashion, like what makes it so successful is kind of, the pricing is cheap, and the quality doesn't have to be like at 100%. They don't have to be made from the best quality materials because it is fast fashion. It will be trendy for what, 1 month, 2 months, maybe a year, and then people are already buying their like the new clothes or the latest trends. And so I feel like what makes it so popular is the fact that it's cheap, and then also celebrities wearing certain garments or wearing a certain specific style. Like I know a while ago when I forgot which celebrity wore like a tracksuit, then all of a sudden that became popular and that was booming, and there were people wearing like sports clothes everywhere. And so I think, and then that also made like, a lot cheaper because everyone was producing it.
Yeah, that's terrifying. So we have discussed some of the environmental impacts of textile dyes, chemicals, microfibers, pesticides, and the emission of fossil fuels. Is there anything you can add about the harmful effects of fast fashion on the planet?
Shall I kick off? And first of all, I thought your presentation was fantastic, by the way. In fact, you took all the talking points I was thinking of saying, so well done. But what I'd like to do is just maybe underline some of these harmful negative effects because they are significant. And if you haven't seen it, there was a report that came out, I think about a year ago by McKinsey and Company that was looking at the climate impact of fast fashion or of fashion overall. Which if you look at fashion's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, it's, quote unquote, only about 4%. But the challenge is that it's a growing industry and it may be 4% now, but it will grow as I said before, as populations grow, it will, so it could potentially overtake some of the other sectors that are contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, like the built environment. So it is a serious problem. But when you try to dissect where is that impact coming from, about 60% is actually coming from the upstream activities. So it's coming from the supply chains of the retailers, whether that is the growing of raw materials like cotton or the producing of garments in factories. That's 60%. About 20% comes from consumer behavior. And I think it's important to point that out because we always say as consumers, in fact, I don't even like the word consumer because that assumes you're actually consuming something. And really, if we look at fashion and want to look at it sustainably, we should look at it as using it and then passing it on for its next use. You don't just consume something and then throw it away. But anyway, that's an aside on vocab. But, we as consumers, we always say, what more can we do? But the reality is that who must do stuff is actually the brands and retailers and the manufacturers and the producers of raw materials, because that's where the majority of the carbon impact is. And there's various ways that one can get that carbon impact down, but I think it's important for us to know kind of what those levers for change. So that's the carbon side. But then there's also, of course, other environmental impacts. Waste is a big issue. You probably saw the report that came out by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation a couple of years ago, which we helped to support with our funding. And it basically said that every second or every 3 seconds, a garbage truck full of textiles goes to landfill. And this is a problem because even if you think you're doing good by recycling and taking your clothes to a recycling bin, and you probably saw this in my TED talk, chances are, when someone is sorting through that recycling, a lot of it still goes to landfill. So there's a problem with how clothes are actually reused and recycled. There's a problem in the infrastructure to facilitate that. There's also a problem in the, I guess, technology and innovation to allow you to even recycle certain types of clothes. Whenever you take something like cotton, which is a biological material, and combine it with polyester, which is a technical material or man-made material, it's impossible to separate those. You can't actually take that apart. So you need something like chemical recycling, which will essentially allow you to dissolve it and then to extract the cotton and the polyester. So these things are coming, but I think until they come, waste is going to continue to be a big problem.
I would like to add on that the general effects of fashion, yes, textiles, but also like makeup in the fashion industry, like do have an impact on the planet in terms of the animals as well being used for these productions of the clothes, and a very, very big one is makeup. The animals being caught for them, the treatment of them in order to produce these like products is very impactful like to the environment. And I know that recently there's been like a huge clash between the fashion industry, like clothing and makeup, and these animals, especially with more and more like fake products and highly pigmented products, and the impact especially in the oceans, and these textiles and synthetic fibers being put into the oceans as well.
Yeah, it's really sad to see all of these effects on the planet. So our next question is for you, Sophia. We're curious about some of the ways that consumers can practice more sustainable clothing habits. So could you tell us a little bit more about upcycling, including what it is, how you can use it in everyday life, and what are some of its benefits?
Yeah, so upcycling is generally when you take trash or something that's no longer useful, you don't have a use. So instead of throwing it out, you can turn it into something new. So, and like even sometimes when you upcycle, you can turn it into like another thing that's like higher value, or maybe that you like better, or that is better use than it originally was before. So you can take an item of clothing and turn it into either another item of clothing or into fabric. For example, currently at my school, what we're doing is a jean drive. They're collecting a bunch of jeans and making that into like the covers for the couches, the communal couches in the school, and other cool things. And so upcycling could also be from even just a plastic bottle and turning into that like art or plant. Working with the Arts Hub and Plastics Hub, there was a project I saw that was really cool, that an art project that was someone turned a bunch of plastic bottles into a bench, a fully like functional bench that you can like sit on. So upcycling is really cool, and it's a good way to kind of turn something that you're not using into something that you love more or better than for a higher value than it originally was. Or it can also prolong the lifespan of that one particular object.
That's really cool. Thank you. And like upcycling, it's so important. And I don't know if you guys know, but kind of to go with this webinar event, we hosted a Trashion Show, which is when you like make an outfit out of trash or recycled materials. And so we had a video that we want to share with all the results. Could you share that now? And we're so excited to share it, and it was so much fun to do. So we hope you all enjoy it.
Whoa, good job to all the participants. That was amazing. The outfits were so cool. Okay, so
Did it. I think a few of you had done it. So thank you so much.
Who here did it? Can we just raise your hands if you did it? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they were so good and cute.
Oh, who did that? I mean, there was one that you couldn't tell who it was.
Oh, there was one, the cardboard one.
Yeah.
My friend made that one, and he wasn't comfortable. I don't think he didn't respond to sharing his name, but I thought that one was really cool.
They were all amazing. I'd love to hear stories about that. And whoever put that video together was great.
Yeah, that was a really good job.
Yigit,
Thank
that
you
was
very much.
awesome.
Thank you.
Really good job. We'll have to really play that up. That'll help us with our promotion. TikTok, wherever you want to put it.
yeah, good job to all the participants. The outfits were amazing. So to continue with the questions, so questions for you, Leslie. So why is sustainable fashion so important, and what would a sustainable or slow fashion model look like?
Okay, sorry, there's a party going on next door. Can you repeat that? Because I couldn't hear very well.
Of course. So why is sustainable fashion so important, and what would a sustainable or slow fashion model look like?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I do think that it's important because fashion is probably one of the few industries that touches all of us around the world. It unites us as humanity. I mean, we all wear clothes. Most of us do, at least. So it is actually far reaching, in its reach. And it also therefore has the potential to do great good if you get the model right. The challenge, of course, right now, as we saw in the issues, is it's actually not necessarily being a force for good. It's probably doing more bad than good. And that impact will continue to grow if we don't make changes. The report I put in the chat from McKinsey actually said brands and retailers have made lots of sustainability commitments. But even if they do everything they said they're going to do, they're still going to miss their commitments and miss basically being aligned with the Paris Agreement commitments. So it's just not enough, so there is a need for people to do more. If we don't actually change the way that we make fashion and get away from this linear take, make, waste model and move to, I think what Sofia was talking about is, more of a circular economy model for fashion, which is really important. We're going to run out of resources. I mean, we are already exceeding our planetary resources, and fashion is a voracious user of resources. So for me, sustainable fashion isn't a nice to have, it's actually a must have. And we really need to understand the urgency and start, getting our favorite brands and retailers to sort of step up. So what does good look like? I mean, for me, good actually looks like a circular fashion industry. And what does that mean? Well, that means that, all these resources that we're using to make fashion should never, ever go to waste. And, and if you look at, and there's a lot of research around this, I'm sure you've heard of the cradle to cradle methodology that Bill McDonald has developed. But if you look at the world and all the materials that are going into fashion, in theory, everything that is organic or biological materials should eventually go into the ground to be composted, and everything that's man-made or technical, like polyester, should live forever, because polyester can be there forever. But the system doesn't allow that kind of use of materials, and therefore we're generating waste. So for me, success is a fully circular system. What that looks like, you can actually read the Ellen MacArthur Foundation report, because they do talk about what circular fashion actually looks like. Another example is Fashion for Good, which is an innovation platform that we actually set up as CNA Foundation. And they're doing a lot of thinking around what does circular fashion look like. But that's what we need to move toward. And what does that mean for each of us? Again, as users of fashion, I'm not going to say consumers, that means we need to think very carefully about, sort of how we use fashion and how we then pass it on. We should never, ever dispose of fashion, and we should try to limit, sort of the virgin materials that we purchase and really focus on other things like secondhand, leasing, renting, that sort of thing. There's other models out there. And ultimately, this is my last point, fashion should not be a product that's sold. I actually really think clothes as a product should become obsolete. We really should think about clothes as a service, and that's when you start getting into, well, what's the next Airbnb model for clothing? And of course, there's, Rent the Runway and all these great companies that are popping up, but we need much, much more to really transform into more of a service model.
Yeah, that's so important to think of clothes as service rather than a good. So this next question is for Sophia. Moving on to the intersection between fast fashion and other topics. And we know that you're a model, so you might have your own view on this. We're interested in how racial biases are perpetuated by the fast fashion industry or just the fashion industry in general.
That's a great question. That I think is actually especially like more prevalent to nowadays, and me being in China, it's a lot different than back in the States with modeling. So to start with the fashion industry in general, here in China, it's, for lack of a better word, they want white people. They and like casting calls or modeling calls or casting, they will specifically say they want Caucasian, or they'll say they want white skin, they say they'll want blonde hair, which is kind of hard. And even when they ask for like an American girl or a Brazilian girl or something like that. And like I give them my comp card or I send in my model card, it's very obvious that you can see that that's like my type of skin tone is not what they were looking for. And when you go to these calls in person, they'll make up excuses saying, oh, you're too tall. Oh, your poses aren't good or something like that. And it's kind of hard, like as a model in the industry, especially here in China, due to race. Even in when you see advertisements for clothes such as H&M, which they do have here, or let's say Adidas or Nikes, the only times you'll see someone of color, whether it's Latina or African American. Anytime that you see someone who is not white or blonde hair and blue eyes, is from advertisements that came from America. And the only time you see people with my skin tone are for like sports advertisements, something like that, unless it's someone already famous. With that being said, currently there's like this big trend here, which influenced by America, which is, the hip hop industry. A lot of people love hip hop here in China. They love Cardi B. They love just like everyone. They use a lot of the fashion that they see online and they see on social media, and they take a lot of those like clothes and even like hairstyle, like putting in braids in their hair and speeches and stuff like that, and that influences what they wear, but it doesn't like work for like higher modeling, like more of, I don't know how to call it, like formal, I guess. Like those things are only like acceptable for clubbing or going out to parties and stuff.
Yeah, that's sad. Yeah, I hope a change will come soon. So, lastly, for you, another question. So, what are the negative effects on the fast fashion industry on its workers? And how can consumers encourage companies to be more transparent about how their products are made?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think a lot of times when we talk about sustainable fashion, we think about the environmental side. In fact, that's all I've talked about so far, and you kind of forget about the social side, and the fact that people actually make the clothes that we love. So there are heaps and heaps of negative issues, as you can imagine, in the way that clothing is made. I think that, I mean, you probably know this already, but the poor working conditions, of course, are always a concern. And this is not necessarily poor working conditions for clothes that go to the big retailers, but it is increasingly the working conditions in the more informal sector, and maybe going to companies that aren't as sustainably focused as some of the big high street retailers. So it's a big issue. And there was actually a good report, I'll put it in the chat in a sec, but there was a good report about 4 years ago that was called The Myth of the Ethical Consumer. And the point was, look, we all, we're very aware of the big brands, and the big brands have quite robust sustainability programs, and they're trying hard, to be better. But we're not aware of some of these very large companies and these brokers that sit behind the big brands that no one has ever heard of, that actually are the ones doing the buying from the manufacturers and may not be doing so ethically and be looking at whether the working conditions are right. And so I'll put a link to that, but I think it was a very good article to show that it's not just brands and retailers that are the actors, it's the brokers behind them that many of them use, and they're the ones that hold the power. But in terms of what the issues are with workers, of course, it's poor working conditions. In a lot of our work, we've seen that there's a lot of gender-based violence and discrimination. We see that specifically in places like southern India, in Tamil Nadu, where you see not only violence against women, but also violence against different castes. So there's an intersectionality issue in terms of how people are impacted by this. We see a lot of child labor, and that's really, really hard to detect because, of course, it's not happening in factories. It's happening in homes. And often brands and retailers may not even know that a factory perhaps outsourced to, basically home workers to complete the product. This is particularly the case of, spring and summer lines that have beaded and embroidered elements. Many times those are hand done and they're outsourced to homes where it's not only perhaps the mother, but also her children that sit next to her and do that. So lots and lots of issues around the social side. Now, what can we do about it? Well, I think that the first and most important thing is that the countries in which these workers are working need to have better social protection. Now, that's not something that we can influence as, users of fashion, but the reality is when COVID hit, who suffered the most in Bangladesh, which is one of the biggest exporters of textiles? It was the workers, because there was no protection for them. There was no, employee insurance that would pay their wages when they basically lost their jobs because of the pandemic. So there are basic protections that need to be in place and put in place by governments. So we're talking about policy change, which is really important. So that's number one. But then I think number two is brands and retailers need to do more to make sure that the working conditions are dignified and people are paid a fair and living wage. And that is happening more and more, and that more brands are starting to embrace programs to try to improve the conditions. But again, unless you have a law that kind of requires that, it's amazing. I mean, I live in Europe, and the second a law comes out in a city that says you can't use plastic bags when you go to shops, guess what? The plastic bags disappear overnight. I mean, laws are really effective, when they see you can't do things. So if you're raising a minimum wage, that can be very effective. So government needs to come in as well, but I think brands and retailers also need to commit to certain minimum wages so that people are able to support themselves. And that's important, which means that we, as buyers of fashion, need to be prepared to pay more, because someone has to pay for this. And, I think this concept of cheap and plentiful fast fashion, where you buy $3 t-shirts and $5 jeans, really shouldn't exist, because someone's paying the price. And the reality is it's actually the workers.
Yeah, it's really important to see the ways that we're able to take action. And this next question is for both of you, but Leslie, you've already sort of touched on it a little bit, so I don't know if you want to start. And there's multiple parts, so just let me know if you need me to repeat any of it. But many people think that their actions cannot affect the choices that major corporations make, but is this really the case? And what role do consumers play in the fast fashion industry? And how impactful are the choices that individuals make? And then finally, whose responsibility is it to take action against fast fashion? Is it the big corporations, consumers, governments, or everyone?
That's a big question. Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. It is the ultimate question, because I think, and I've already said this earlier, but the onus should not be on the consumer to fix the fashion industry. And in the same way, the onus should not be on us as individuals to fix climate change, because I actually think, and okay, I can get on my soapbox, but there is actually a tendency to kind of push it to consumers, and to say, your choices will actually change the industry. But in reality, we are a small part of the larger consumers of fast fashion, and what we do in our kind of Western societies isn't necessarily going to change the global industry, especially as countries develop, middle incomes increase, and more people want access to fast fashion. So I don't think that's the way. I actually think the way is really to focus on business, and really try to get business to step up more. Now, the good news is that there are actually leading businesses that are really embracing sustainability and doing good things around that. But it's not enough to rely on business to transform itself. It won't. Business will only optimize how it does business. It's not going to completely transform the business model of fast fashion. And that's where you need other elements. And there are certain elements I think are important. One is transparency and accountability mechanisms. The more you can shine a light on business and basically celebrate the leaders, but also shine a light on the laggards, that actually is very effective. And so one of our partners is Fashion Revolution. And Fashion Revolution, yes, they have their campaign about trying to understand, who makes your clothes, and tries to get the world to rally behind that, which I think is a wonderful campaign. They also have the Transparency Index. And what that does, it basically, is a league table that shows all the countries and given all the companies in given countries and how they're performing against different sustainability criteria. And these types of things are really important because it brings to light, the transparency of who's doing what and who's not acting enough. And then that allows us as consumer to choose different brands if we find a brand is low on the list, or governments to get involved and to start actually trying to push up the laggards through different legislation. So accountability mechanisms are really important. Now, who's going to solve the problem? I mean, I don't think there's a silver bullet. I do think business, government, and consumers all have a role to play, but I also don't think there's one of those three that has the role. We're all in this together. Government has to have the enabling legislation in place. And right now, it's not so much on the US side, but on the European side, there's a lot of legislation coming in place around mandatory human rights due diligence. What does that mean? Well, it means if you're a company and you want to work in a country like Norway, you have to have proof that you did due diligence, that there's no violation of human rights in your supply chain, and there's no violation of environmental, there's no environmental degradation. And that's massive. Like that basically means, to operate in a country like Norway, you have to prove that you're respecting human rights and you're respecting nature. And companies right now don't have that information to be able to say that. So that type of legislation is the tool that governments have. Businesses have to continue to step up. They're not doing enough. I think they need to question their own practices, their own business models. They need to embrace new business models. I talked about clothing as a service. There are brands here in Europe like Chibo and H&M and others that have actually embraced leasing models, even within their existing business models. So there's ways that you could do that. And then of course, we as consumers or users have to do more. And I think you listed everything we could do very well on your PowerPoint. So I don't need to go into that, but we do have a role to play. So there's no easy answer to your question, like who needs to do this, but I would say it's not right to say that we as consumers are the ones that really need to fix this. I think business and government have equally a role to play.
I agree with you because I think every single person like has to play a part to this. And by everyone, I mean, like government official, from mayors, presidents, these CEOs of these corporations. Every single person plays a role into changing this. And I think it starts as a government level making these policies, just as you were saying. And I think it's very interesting that which country was it, like Norway, that has that policy. I find that really interesting. And really ahead of like everyone, so the government making these policies and these corporations making their clothing items and their everything like according to these policies, and everyone being very aware of the fact that what they're doing, aware of the fact of trying to make it sustainable, and instead of just making it fast and cheap and like overproducing. People have to like really think about the planet and resources that they're using when they're making these clothes. And then I think it is also up to the consumers to know what they're doing, like knowing what they're buying, because these corporations can continue making the clothings like these because there's a large amount of people buying them. If there's no one buying them, they're not going to continue making them in these large proportions, and it's not going to be such a big thing. So I think also as a consumer, since you are the ones buying the items, not just making a sustainable choice, but like if you have a favorite brand, contacting them or letting them know, or talent, or like scheduling a meeting or sending an email and rallying some of your friends and being like, hey, I don't like how unsustainable this is, or maybe you should try making this more sustainable. And then you can kind of change the brand, like change what the brand is doing, because in the end of the day, the brand is kept alive by its consumers. It's kept alive by everyone. And if the people are not like saying anything about it, and it's just up to the governments, or if it's just up to the corporations, nothing will happen. Everybody has their role to play, and everyone has to play that role in order to make a successful outcome or a desired outcome. And that also goes for, celebrities and models and influencers, because they are also influence others around them. So they also need to be the ones speaking on this. Yeah, that's what I have to say for like answering that question.
That's so interesting. So again, another question for you both. So how can consumers shop more sustainably, and what are the main issues that consumers need to think about before purchasing clothing, and what are some sustainable practices that consumers can take?
Okay, well, I'll kick off. And actually, something Sophia
So
said. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, you.
Yeah. Okay, there's a bit of delay. Yeah, no, Sophia, I just put in the chat. You had said it, it's important to reach out to brands. I fully agree with that. And actually, Fashion Revolution has made it really easy to do that. You can actually go to their website and they give you a little format. All you have to do is cut and paste and send it to your favorite brand. But I think in terms of what consumers can do, I mean, I think you listed a lot of those already on your PowerPoint, but first of all, think of clothing as something you use and then pass on to its next use. So that means get away from buying things, throwing it away, rent, lease if you can, buy secondhand, etc. But also think about how much you wash your clothes. And that's something that people often don't think about. But when you look at the water use in, say, a pair of jeans, most of the water that is used in jeans in their whole life cycle is in the post-consumer phase, i.e. how much you wash your jeans. So I think that we do have a role to play in terms of the environmental impact once we have the clothes as well. And that's something to think about. In fact, it was the CEO of Levi's who claimed, it's kind of disgusting actually, but he claimed that he keeps his jeans in his freezer, which means he doesn't have to ever wash them. So I don't know, don't try that one at home, but there's things that we can do to limit that impact. But Sophia, please go ahead.
Oh wait, I was on mute, sorry. So I think consumers can shop more sustainably by first being informed, knowing, which brands are sustainable or what their favorite brands are kind of doing, and also knowing, what fast fashion is, maybe thinking twice, being like, hey, do I really need to buy that t-shirt right now? Or do I really need that because I'll just not wear it a couple months down the road? Another, thing, like factor of fast fashion and wasting of clothes and everything like that is kind of, holidays and seasons. Summer's coming, so everyone is, well, at least with my family, we go through, spring cleaning. You go over your things and then buy things for the summer. Then you do your fall cleaning. You clean everything, you donate a bunch of clothes, and then you buy more things for the fall. That's not sustainable, and I think consumers can think about what they're doing. Do I need to throw out these t-shirts just because it's out of fad or out of style or something like that? And it'll just be out of style again the next year. So you don't buy things with the intention of making them last, of wearing them for a long time, or really think about something before you buy. And then once they have an item of clothing, maybe they don't like it anymore, upcycle. You can do so much with upcycling. So I know one of my friends, he bought a pair of jeans and they got quite a bunch of holes, and then he was really hot whenever he wore them because he moved to the south part of China, and so then he just made those jeans some jean shorts. He didn't have to go out and buy a new pair. He didn't have to do anything. He just, cut the bottoms off. He used the jean shorts, and then whenever he gets a hole in some other pants, like he kept the other material, the bottom part. Whenever he got holes in the pants, he just used those to stitch up the holes. And then I know that another person I know did a similar thing by like making their pair of jeans some shorts, and she turned the leg parts of the jeans into like arm sleeves, because that's kind of, there was a point in time where that was like really, really like in fashion, wearing, those like arm sleeve glove thingies. I forgot what they're called. And so she just used those bottoms to make those. And not only was she trendy with them, they were like reused and cost not even a cent to make those.
It's really great to hear that. And I'll definitely adopt some of the practices that both of you discussed in my own life to be more sustainable. So for our last question, before we open it up to audience questions, it's for both of you. And it's because we cannot see the production of our clothing. Many people do not think or care about the negative effects of fast fashion. I feel like people usually go into a store and they might just see that clothing's cheap, so they'll buy whatever is the cheapest. So how can we encourage better education about fast fashion and shopping sustainably? And how can we encourage more people to care about this issue?
Sophia, do you want to start?
Sure. From my perspective, I definitely say, especially like young people who tend to like buy a lot of things, teenagers who want their parents to buy them like clothes, they tend to like watch or listen to like the people that influence them, influencers, celebrities. And I think just like those people who are like, if you're influencing a lot of people, then like tell them about, like educate them on like fast fashion and these things. And then also just everyday people that you talk to, so like teachers, professors. I think those people who have important roles to influence someone in their choices and teach them should tell them about these like the negative effects, or encourage them. And I also think in schools, you should do, when you're talking about like recycling or sustainability, definitely mention, clothes and fast fashion and shopping sustainable, because everyone shops, and then parents as well, talking to their children about it. You can like encourage them about the issue. And I think having it as a talking point, because it is something that people kind of ignore. And as Leslie said earlier, everyone wears clothes. But it's something that's not talked about at all, or very, very talked about a small amount. And I think just having it more talked about, naturally talked about in conversations, is definitely a way to encourage that.
Yeah. And I think just building on that, I do think you need to start earlier. You need to get this type of information into education. And that's something that Fashion Revolution has done a lot of work on. I'll just put it into the Am I muted? Did you hear any of that? So I'm having tech issues, so just building on what Sophia was saying, I think you also need to start earlier. You know, you need to get this into education. You need to help kids understand at a young age, you know, why it's important to think about where your clothes come from, how they're made, what's in them. And Fashion Revolution has a lot of great resources for educators. In fact, I even have spoken at my own kids' school when they were much, much younger, you know, and there's fun games where you can have a map of the world and you have people look at their clothing and see where was it made, and you put it up on the map and you have a discussion around, you know, Bangladesh and India. And so you can start younger, and that's important. But I think also the challenge with raising awareness right now is that we as consumers do not have the data we need to make informed decisions. If you go to your favorite shop and you want to buy a pair of jeans, how do you know where they were made, how they were made, you know, where the people paid a fair living wage, what chemicals are on the jeans, you know, are the jeans made from organic cotton, et cetera. Some of those things you do know because there's labels. There's labels for things like organic. Sometimes there's labels for fair trade, which can actually reflect what people were paid. Sometimes there's labels around the chemical composition, and that's when you get into Blue Sign, which is a program to show that you're using better chemicals. But it's a little bit loosey-goosey. It's all over the place, you know, and so we are not empowered to make those decisions. So we need brands and retailers to give us the information we need to make better decisions, you know. So why should it be our responsibility to raise awareness amongst ourselves? Like, they need to tell us what's in the product that they're selling to us. So I think that's where companies need to step up. That's where governments need to step up. And actually, amazingly, the government in France, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, actually passed a law that was requiring certain environmental information to be on clothing, to say, if you're buying a piece of clothing, here's the chemical composition, so you know what's in there, you know, like you see on food, you know. So that should be in our future. And I think once that's in place, then we as consumers can make better decisions.
That's inspiring. So to end this, we would like to open the floor to any questions from the audience. So we encourage you to mute, but if you feel more comfortable, you can put the questions in the chat too.
I guess I can go then, if that's okay. Well, I guess the big question here is, you've been discussing a lot about influencers. What do you think is the significance of, I guess, of, as you've stated, celebrities in the role of fashion? Because the thing, as you've said, there's a great external pressure from um from clothing designers and their models who promote bad ethics in regards to clothing, whether it be socially or environmentally. So like, could you, I guess, explain the role that you'd hope for these groups to have?
Definitely. So for influencers and celebrities, of course they have a lot of eyes on them, a lot of followers, a lot of people who, you know, care about what they do day to day, people who are watching what they wear and what they're doing. So I think it's and you know, of course, like people have like certain styles too. So people who are known like for their styles and what people that they influence, or like followers and fans, will, like, you know, go to these stores. A lot of influencers tend to have collaborations with brands and designers about you know, their clothing, like where do they get it from, and then the fans will, you know, buy things from that store because they want to wear the same things. I see this a lot actually with, like, you know, the K-pop industry. A lot of fans of certain groups will try to buy the clothing from specific videos or from specific dance videos, try to buy, like, you know, like the exact clothing, or try to find as close as possible to that. And I think it's important to those people who have those eyes on them to kind of, like say, or maybe support sustainable brands, or very just, I think it's important for them to like have this knowledge of sustainable fashion to influence more people, for example, I know there's, quite a few like celebrities that are vegan um and like encourage their followers to be vegan or practice, sustainable eating or eat healthy and things like that. And that can also be applied with fashion and sustainable fashion. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah, it did.
Does anyone else have a question?
I mean, I could ask one more, but like, I'm not gonna.
I have a question, and I know we probably need to wrap this up, but Leslie and Sophia, you've talked a lot about what people can do. Do you have any suggestions for what a hub full of teenagers from all over the world can do in a virtual room? And, this hub has lots of, this hub focuses on climate change, which has so many things they are working on and can be working on. But if you just focus on this area, I can think of a number of things that they could do to motivate teens, to build a momentum. But I'd like your thoughts.
Oh, there's so much you can do. And I think first of all, I'm really excited to be part of this panel because it's just great to see the passion and commitment about this topic. I mean, when I think of when I was in high school, you don't even think about this type of stuff. So the fact that you're very aware that there's a problem and want to do something about it is very exciting. But I think in terms of, what can the youth and movements do? I mean, I think that, ultimately, the more vocal you are with brands and retailers, the more you can highlight that there is a problem, the more you can, sort of, join hands with influencers and actually, show that fast fashion is not acceptable. There's different ways you can do that. I mean, can you imagine what if, the sort of everyone, under the age of 20 in a certain state decided to boycott fast fashion for a month? Well, I mean, there's things you can do. You have power with kind of the dollars that you have, but you have power with your voice, and using social media in a way to do that. And there's creative ways you can do that. And I'll give you an example of something I did a couple of years ago. I participated in a fundraiser that was done by the Clean Clothes Campaign, and they are one of the activist organizations really trying to raise awareness of the working conditions in the industry. But the fundraiser was really quite fun. It was called the 6-item challenge. And so for 6 weeks, I could only wear six pieces of clothing. And that's it. And so basically I just wore the same thing to work for 6 weeks straight. And it was actually a great thing because it got a lot of exposure. It was fun, so you could come up with these types of things like fundraisers, which can raise awareness for some of these groups that are working to fight, the injustice that you see sometimes in this industry, but do it in a fun way that can actually get a lot of uptake. So lots and lots of things you can do. And I think movements are where, the action is. Fashion Revolution is a great example of a movement. There are many others, join these movements, connect the dots, and really sort of bring your voice because you are, you're the market that these companies are going after. So it's important to hear from you all. Yeah, actually, they give you a free pass on underwear and socks for some reason. So you could actually, which I think everyone was pleased to hear that. But yes, other than that, it was hard going. But I am all for capsule collections. I mean, actually, I cleaned out my closet many years ago, and now I think I own like 2 pairs of shoes, for example. So you can do it, but it's hard to really pare down to 6 items.
My like to like add on that my boyfriend, he is a minimalist, and like he's like one of those like really really hardcore ones. So like I think he has like 3 t-shirts and like 2 pairs of jeans and 1 pair of shorts, and it's like kind of funny because he's like really hardcore to the point he had 2 pairs of shoes, and then the left one broke of one of them and the right one broke of the other, so then he wore that like mismatched pair. Like one of them was like some black Converse and the other shoe was Timberlands. And he just wore that until everything like kind of like broke down. And I was like, wow, that's very hardcore, but like why do we think that as hardcore? Like to have less clothing and stuff like that is kind of interesting to me, especially as someone who does modeling, and I do have people watching, you know, I kind of like fell into that where, you know, I wear different styles of clothing, different accessories every single day that people would ask me, you know, like every day you're wearing something different. What are you going to go tomorrow? So that kind of like created a thing for me where I always have to have new clothes, new looks. And I find it like I realized I had to kind of like tone it down, lessen my things, and it's kind of interesting the difference between me and the minimalist, and we when we used to live together. It it was very different to see, you know, his side of the closet versus mine, like his 2 t-shirts hanging there versus my like plethora of t-shirts and dresses and skirts. And I think it's also fast fashion instead of full fashion is also like kind of like a gender thing too, because like females have a lot more clothing like that they can like wear, or a lot more, you know, from dresses to shirts to jumpers and rompers and all of these things. And guys have like shirt, pants, nice shirt, work shirt, something like that.
Does anyone else have any other questions? I feel like you guys answered so many questions, like in the, I don't know, you guys did a great job of kind of sharing everything we wanted to hear.
Great. They were great questions. And actually, I really like the PowerPoint as well. You've done a lot of really good work picking out the issues. It's great.
So if no one else has any questions, we'd just like to conclude the webinar by asking each of you to give a quick closing, just a few closing words, like maybe 30 seconds, or key takeaways that you'd like our audience members to remember coming away from this webinar.
Great. Okay, well, I'll start. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think it's important that we all understand the enormity and the urgency of the problem we're faced with. This is not a nice to have. I do think that fashion will increasingly be one of the biggest impactors of climate, and we are in a climate emergency. So if we want to act, this is an area where we can act. So I urge you all to think about the fashion that you use. Try to think of it as a service, not a product that you buy and dispose of. And love the clothes that you do buy, because I think, what was the quote? You know, love clothes like the good friends that they are, because we should be buying high quality clothes that will last a long, long time. So thank you from my side. This has been a great opportunity to hear how you're thinking about this. I'm actually very inspired by what I've heard today.
For my closing statement, I would like to state that like key takeaway points, look at where you're shopping and look at like where the items are made and like inform the people around you about sustainable fashion, fast fashion, and what you can do from that. And also just try to influence those around you about it. Don't just follow a fad, and think about like your choices before you just go and buy something, or before you feel the urge that you should go and buy something because everyone has it, or you're where you don't have that. And I really want to enjoy, like, for you guys to like enjoy like what you have. There is a person, Marie Kondo, I'm sure some people watched her little tidying up thing. I actually read the book before I like even knew that was a show. When the book first came out. I really like how she says, like, have all the items that you have and make them spark joy in you. So like take care of the things that you have and make them last, like that make them last longer. If something has a rip, turn it into something new, turn it into something of a better quality, something, upcycle, and have fun with it. And that's all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys both so much. This has been so great. Is everyone okay with it if we take a screenshot? Okay. All right, I'm gonna take it now. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. That was great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great work, you guys. I'm so proud of you. That was amazing. Really great.